Have you ever noticed how the worst decisions you've made weren't really decisions at all? They were reactions. Split-second responses to hurt, anger, or fear that seemed to make sense in the moment but left you with regret that lingered for days, weeks, or even years. What if I told you that the single most powerful skill you could develop isn't about achieving more, earning more, or even knowing more? It's about mastering the art of the pause. That tiny space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. Think about it. When was the last time you sent a message in anger that you immediately wished you could take back? Or maybe you've walked away from a conversation, replaying what you said, cringing at how you sounded when your emotions took the wheel. We've all been there. The good news is that emotional control isn't some rare gift that only a few lucky people possess. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be learned, practiced, and strengthened until it becomes your natural way of being. The truth is, most people go through life essentially on autopilot, bouncing from one emotional reaction to the next like a pinball. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and rage floods their system. A colleague makes a snide comment, and defensiveness takes over. Their partner forgets something important, and hurt transforms into silent treatment or an explosion. But here's what's fascinating. In each of these moments, there's actually a choice point. A fraction of a second where you can either ride the wave of emotion wherever it takes you, or you can grab the reins and decide who you want to be. So let me ask you something. What would your life look like if you could consistently choose calm over chaos? If you could face criticism without your stomach dropping? If you could handle disappointment without spiraling? This isn't about becoming emotionless or robotic. It's about becoming emotionally intelligent. It's about feeling everything fully while refusing to let those feelings write checks that your future self has to cash. Let's start with understanding what's really happening when you react. Your brain has this ancient alarm system called the amygdala. Think of it as your internal smoke detector. When it senses threat, whether that's a bear in the woods or your boss sending a tersely worded email at 9 p.m., it triggers your fight or flight response. Your heart rate spikes, stress hormones flood your bloodstream, and your thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, basically goes offline. This happens in milliseconds, which explains why you can go from perfectly fine to completely reactive before you even realize what's happening. But here's the thing. Your amygdala can't tell the difference between a genuine threat and a perceived one. It treats your mother-in-law's criticism about your parenting the same way it would treat a physical attack. And when you're in that state, you're not making conscious choices. You're surviving. The problem is that survival mode is terrible at preserving relationships, building careers, or creating the peaceful life you actually want. Now, have you ever watched someone stay completely composed in a situation that would have sent most people over the edge? Maybe it was a customer service representative dealing with an abusive caller, or a friend who handled devastating news with surprising grace. What you're witnessing isn't the absence of emotion. It's the presence of that critical pause. They've trained themselves to create space between the trigger and the response. And in that space, they get to choose. Creating this space starts with one simple but profound practice. Noticing. You can't change what you don't see. So begin paying attention to your body's early warning signs. Maybe your jaw clenches when you're getting angry. Maybe your chest tightens when you're anxious. Maybe you feel heat rising up the back of your neck when someone disrespects you. These physical sensations are like your check engine light. They're telling you that you're entering reactive territory, and it's time to slow down. When you catch these signals, try this. Take 3 deep breaths. I know it sounds almost insultingly simple, but there's actual neuroscience behind it. Deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is basically the antidote to fight or flight. It tells your brain that you're safe, which allows your thinking brain to come back online. Those 3 breaths create just enough space for you to ask yourself a crucial question: is this how I want to show up right now? And then one day, seemingly out of nowhere, they emerge with results that leave everyone speechless. That's not luck. That's not an accident. That's the power of silent execution. And today, you're going to learn exactly how to harness it for yourself. Before we dive deep, let me ask you something. How much energy have you wasted trying to convince people of what you're capable of? How many times have you announced a goal, felt that rush of approval, and then completely lost the motivation to actually achieve it? Drop a comment below because what I'm about to share will fundamentally change how you approach every goal from this moment forward. The most powerful move you'll ever make is the one nobody sees coming. That's the truth most people never learn. They think success requires an audience. They think progress needs to be documented, validated, shared. But here's what actually happens when you live that way: you trade real power for temporary comfort. You exchange genuine progress for the illusion of progress. You get trapped performing instead of producing. And while you're busy updating everyone about what you're going to do, the silent ones are actually doing it. Real winners don't announce their plans. They execute them. They don't need to convince anyone they're serious because their results do the convincing. They understand something profound, that talking about your goals gives your brain a false sense of accomplishment. The moment you announce what you're going to do, you get a dopamine hit as if you've already done it. Your brain rewards you for the announcement, not the achievement. And that's exactly why so many people never follow through. They got the satisfaction they were seeking without doing any actual work. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone make a big declaration about changing their life? They post about their new fitness journey, their business idea, their commitment to transformation. Everyone likes it. Everyone comments encouragement. And then what happens? Absolutely nothing. A week later, they're back to their old patterns. Because the announcement gave them what they wanted: attention, validation, the feeling that they're doing something important, without requiring them to actually do anything difficult. This is the trap that keeps 99% of people stuck in mediocrity forever. So here's where everything changes. Close your mouth and get serious about your life. That's not just advice. That's a command you need to give yourself right now. Stop explaining. Stop justifying. Stop seeking approval for every decision. Just commit. Quietly. Internally. In a moment between you and yourself, make a decision that you're done wasting time. Done performing for others. Done living below your potential. This decision doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need an announcement. It happens in a quiet moment when you've finally had enough. Enough of the excuses. Enough of the delays. Enough of being average. That moment changes everything, but only if you keep it private and let it fuel your actions rather than your words. Because here's the truth: you don't owe anyone an explanation about your goals. Not your friends who aren't going anywhere. Not your family who might not understand. Not the people on social media who are just as lost as you used to be. This is your life. Your one shot. And if you want to transform it, you need to start acting like it matters more than anyone else's opinion. Most people won't understand your hunger anyway. They won't understand why you're suddenly unavailable, why you're not responding to every message, why you're not hanging out as much. And that's completely fine. They don't need to understand. You're not building your life to make sense to others. You're building it to become the person you know you're capable of being. That version of you, the one you think about late at night, the one you've been suppressing, the one that haunts you with possibility, that version doesn't need attention. It needs action. Daily, unglamorous, unseen action. The kind of work that nobody applauds because nobody knows you're doing it. Start asking yourself real questions. Are you actually using your time wisely? Or are you just filling hours with distractions? Are you making the best use of your mornings? Or are you sleeping through your competitive advantage? Think about the last time you completely lost it. Maybe you yelled at your kids over something trivial. Maybe you sent a scathing text to someone who hurt you. Maybe you quit something in a moment of frustration. Now ask yourself, how long did that moment of reaction last? Probably less than a minute. But how long did you deal with the consequences? Days? Weeks? Some reactions create ripples that never fully go away. The bitter truth is that a 60-second reaction can require months of repair. But here's the hopeful truth: a 60-second pause can prevent months of regret. Let's talk about something that might make you uncomfortable. Your triggers aren't random. They're usually connected to deeper wounds or unmet needs that have nothing to do with the present moment. When someone interrupts you and you feel intense anger, it might not really be about the interruption. Maybe it's connected to years of feeling unheard in your family. When someone criticizes your work and you feel crushed, maybe it's touching that old wound of never feeling good enough. These emotional sore spots are running your life from the shadows until you shine a light on them. Have you ever noticed that the same situation affects different people completely differently? One person gets cut off in traffic and shrugs it off. Another person gets cut off and it ruins their entire morning. The difference isn't the event. It's the meaning they attach to it. This is where your power lives. You can't control what happens around you, but you have complete authority over the story you tell yourself about what it means. Here's a practice that might change your life. At the end of each day, spend 5 minutes reviewing your emotional reactions. Not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself. Where did you react today? What triggered you? What were you really feeling beneath the anger or defensiveness? What old story got activated? This kind of honest reflection builds self-awareness, and self-awareness is the foundation of self-control. You're essentially training yourself to spot the patterns so you can interrupt them next time. Now, let's address something important. Not reacting doesn't mean you become a doormat. It doesn't mean you suppress your feelings or allow people to mistreat you. Actually, it's the opposite. When you're not controlled by emotion, you can set boundaries with clarity and strength. You can say no without guilt. You can address disrespect without becoming disrespectful yourself. You can stand up for what matters without burning bridges you might later wish you'd preserved. The people who truly master this don't avoid difficult conversations. They just approach them differently. Instead of going in hot, ready to prove they're right and the other person is wrong, they go in curious. They ask questions. They seek to understand before demanding to be understood. And you know what happens? The whole dynamic shifts. It's almost impossible to have a screaming match with someone who refuses to raise their voice, who stays grounded while you're spinning out. Let me ask you something. How much of your mental energy do you spend replaying conversations, stewing over slights, or planning comebacks to things people said to you? For many people, it's hours every single day. That's energy you could be using to build something, to rest, to connect with people you love, to actually enjoy your life. Every time you choose not to react, you're taking that energy back. You're refusing to rent out space in your head to people and situations that don't deserve it. Here's what I've noticed about people who've developed real emotional control. They have this quiet confidence about them. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not performing strength. They just are strong. And that strength comes from knowing they can handle their own emotions. They trust themselves not to explode, not to collapse, not to make everything worse when things get hard. That self-trust is magnetic. People feel safe around them. They seek their counsel. They want to be near that calm. But building this takes practice, and you're going to mess up. A lot. You're going to have days where you react in all the old ways, where you say things you regret, where your emotions run the show. That's not failure. That's part of the process. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress. It's catching yourself a little sooner each time. It's noticing the pattern even if you still fall into it. It's apologizing when you mess up instead of defending your reaction. Every single one of these moments is practice, and practice is how you get better. Can I tell you about something that changed my perspective on this? I started thinking of my emotions like weather. Sometimes it's sunny. Sometimes storms roll through. But I'm not the weather. I'm the sky that holds it. The weather passes through, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but it always passes. When you start seeing emotions this way, they lose some of their grip on you. You can say, "Oh, I'm noticing anger right now," instead of "I am angry." That small shift creates massive space. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself is this: will this matter in 5 years? When you're furious about something, ask it. When you're about to fire off that email, ask it. When you're considering ending a friendship over a disagreement, ask it. Most of the time, the honest answer is no. In 5 years, you probably won't even remember this moment. But you might still be dealing with the consequences of how you handled it. This perspective doesn't make real problems disappear, but it helps you see the difference between real problems and temporary discomfort dressed up as emergencies. Let's talk about your morning, because how you start your day sets the tone for everything that follows. Are you grabbing your phone before your feet hit the floor, immediately flooding your brain with other people's problems, opinions, and urgencies? Or are you giving yourself even 10 minutes of quiet to set your intention for the day? This might sound like a small thing, but it's actually massive. Those first moments of the day are when your brain is most receptive to programming. You can either program yourself for reactive chaos or intentional calm. Which sounds better to you? Think about building what I call your emotional immune system. Just like your physical immune system gets stronger when you take care of your body, your emotional immune system gets stronger when you take care of your mind. That means sleep. That means moving your body. That means eating food that actually nourishes you instead of just filling you up. That means limiting your exposure to rage-bait news and social media drama. When you're running on 4 hours of sleep, living on coffee and stress, everything feels like a crisis. Small annoyances become major threats. But when you're rested and grounded, you have the resilience to handle what comes without losing your center. Here's something nobody talks about enough. Your silence has power. When someone is trying to provoke you, waiting for you to explode so they can paint you as the problem, your calm is devastating to their narrative. When you refuse to engage with toxicity, when you meet chaos with composure, you're not being weak. You're being strategic. You're protecting your peace while making it crystal clear that you won't be manipulated into playing their game. That kind of strength is quiet, but it's unmistakable. Now, what about those moments when you genuinely need to respond, when staying silent isn't the answer? This is where the pause becomes even more critical. Before you speak, ask yourself, is this true? Is this kind? Is this necessary? If you can answer yes to all three, proceed with clarity. If you can't, either revise what you're about to say or reconsider whether you need to say anything at all. This filter has saved countless people from saying things that would have damaged relationships beyond repair. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. How many of your reactions are actually about the present moment, and how many are about keeping alive some story you've been telling yourself for years? Maybe the story that you're not respected. Or that people always let you down. Or that you have to fight for everything you get. These stories can become so familiar that you unconsciously create situations that confirm them. You react not to what's actually happening, but to keep the story alive. Breaking free from this pattern starts with questioning the story itself. Is it really true, or is it just familiar? One of the most underrated practices for emotional control is gratitude. I know it sounds almost trendy to talk about gratitude, but here's why it works. When you're genuinely focused on what you appreciate, your brain can't simultaneously be in reactive mode. They're neurologically incompatible states. So when you feel yourself getting worked up, shift your attention to 3 things you're grateful for right in that moment. It can be as simple as, I'm grateful I have a choice in how I respond. I'm grateful my body is sending me signals. I'm grateful I've learned that reactions don't serve me. This isn't about bypassing real emotions. It's about giving your brain an alternative path. Think about the people you most admire. The ones you respect deeply. How do they handle pressure? Chances are, they don't melt down at every inconvenience. They don't lash out when challenged. They don't make every disagreement personal. They've learned to separate their ego from their response. They can hear criticism without hearing attack. They can face opposition without needing to destroy the opposer. They've developed what might be the most valuable skill of all, the ability to disagree without being disagreeable, to stand firm without being rigid, to care deeply without being controlled by that care. Here's what emotional mastery really gives you. Freedom. Freedom from the exhausting cycle of reaction and regret. Freedom from being controlled by other people's moods, opinions, or behaviors. Freedom from living at the mercy of your own unexamined emotions. This freedom isn't about not caring. It's about caring so much about your peace, your purpose, and your progress that you refuse to trade them for temporary satisfaction of being right, getting even, or releasing tension through an explosion. Let's dig deeper into something crucial. The difference between responding and reacting. When you react, you're operating from your primitive brain, the part that's wired for survival. It's fast, it's automatic, and it's usually wrong about the level of threat you're actually facing. But when you respond, you're engaging your higher brain, the part capable of nuance, perspective, and wisdom. The part that can see beyond this moment to the bigger picture of who you want to be and what kind of life you're trying to build. Here's a practical tool you can use starting today. When you feel that surge of emotion rising, literally count to 10 before you do or say anything. Not in your head where you can rush through it, but out loud if possible, or on your fingers. This forces a biological pause. It interrupts the neural pathway from trigger to reaction. And in those 10 seconds, something remarkable happens. The intensity of the emotion usually drops by at least half. Suddenly, what felt like a 5-alarm fire feels more like something you can actually handle. Have you ever considered how much of your reactivity is actually learned behavior? Think about the household you grew up in. How did the adults around you handle anger? Disappointment? Conflict? If you saw yelling, you probably yell. If you saw silent treatment, you probably withdraw. If you saw passive aggression, well, you get the idea. The beautiful and challenging truth is that you're not stuck with these patterns. You can choose to be the person who breaks the cycle. You can be the one who handles things differently, who models emotional maturity for the next generation. Now let's talk about something that might surprise you. Sometimes the most emotionally controlled response is actually to feel your feelings completely. Not to act on them impulsively, but to give them space to exist. When you try to suppress or ignore emotions, they don't disappear. They go underground and come out sideways. But when you can sit with discomfort, when you can say to yourself, "This is really painful right now, and I'm going to let myself feel it without making it worse," you're building tremendous emotional capacity. Think of it like this. Emotions are like visitors knocking on your door. When you react, you're flinging the door open and letting them trash your house. When you suppress, you're pretending nobody's there while they keep knocking louder and louder. But when you respond with awareness, you're opening the door calmly, acknowledging the visitor, maybe even offering them a seat, but not letting them take over. You're the host of your own emotional experience, not the hostage. Here's a question for you. What are you afraid would happen if you didn't react? Sometimes we use our reactions as a way to feel powerful, to prove we matter, to show we won't be pushed around. But real power isn't loud. Real power is the person who can take the hit and not hit back. The person who can be disrespected and still respect themselves enough not to stoop to that level. The person who understands that their peace is more valuable than proving any point. Let me share something about the relationship between emotional control and decision-making. Every major decision you'll ever make, whether it's about your career, your relationships, your health, or your finances, will be better when made from a place of emotional stability rather than emotional reaction. Think about the job you almost quit in anger. The relationship you almost ended in hurt. The investment you almost made in excitement. How many of those would have been mistakes? Probably most of them. Learning to wait, to let the emotional weather pass before making big moves, this is wisdom in action. And here's something else to consider. Your emotional reactions don't just affect you. They ripple out to everyone around you. Your kids are watching how you handle frustration. Your partner is learning whether they can trust you to stay grounded when things get tough. Your colleagues are forming opinions about your reliability and professionalism based on how you handle pressure. Every time you choose composure over chaos, you're not just helping yourself. You're creating a calmer environment for everyone in your orbit. What about those times when the emotion is just too big, when the pause doesn't seem like enough? This is where having a toolkit becomes essential. Maybe for you it's taking a walk. Maybe it's calling that one friend who gets you. Maybe it's writing in a journal until your hand cramps. Maybe it's intense exercise that lets you physically release what you're feeling. The specific tool doesn't matter as much as having something you can turn to that's healthier than exploding or imploding. Think about this too. How different would your relationships be if people knew they could bring you bad news, honest feedback, or difficult truths without you falling apart or lashing out? When you build a reputation for emotional steadiness, people trust you more. They're more honest with you. They bring you into important conversations because they know you won't make things worse. This kind of trust is built slowly, through consistent choices to respond rather than react. Here's something that takes real courage to admit. Sometimes our reactions are about control. When we feel powerless in a situation, reacting gives us a false sense of control. If I can't control what's happening, at least I can control how big of a scene I make about it. But that's not actually control. That's just noise. Real control is accepting what you can't change while choosing what you can, which is always your response. And listen, there will be times when you need to express anger, hurt, or disappointment. Emotional control doesn't mean you never show negative emotions. It means you choose when, where, and how to express them in ways that are productive rather than destructive. There's a massive difference between saying, "I'm really angry about this and we need to talk about it," versus screaming and breaking things. Both involve anger, but only one involves control. As we come to the close of our time together, I want to leave you with this thought. Every moment of your life, you're either being shaped by your circumstances or you're shaping your response to them. You're either reacting or you're choosing. And the beautiful thing is, you get to decide, right now, in this very moment, which one it's going to be. Not forever. Not for every moment for the rest of your life. Just for this moment. And then the next one. And then the one after that. That's how you build a life of emotional strength. One conscious choice at a time. What would change in your relationships if you brought this kind of presence to them? What would shift in your career if you could stay composed under pressure? What would open up in your life if you stopped wasting energy on reactions and redirected it toward your actual goals and dreams? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're invitations to imagine a different way of being. And once you can imagine it, you can build it. Starting right now. Starting with the very next thing that would normally trigger you, and choosing, just this once, to pause instead. To breathe instead. To respond with intention instead of reaction. You have everything you need to do this. The only question is whether you're willing to practice. To show up for yourself even when it's hard. To choose the long game over the short-term satisfaction of letting loose. Because that's what this is really about. It's about loving your future self enough to protect them from the consequences of your current emotional state. It's about building a version of you that you can trust, that others can count on, that can weather any storm because you've learned to be the calm in the center of it. That's the promise of emotional mastery. Not that life stops being hard. But that you become someone who can handle hard things with grace, strength, and intention. And that changes absolutely everything.